Hello and welcome to another program of Business 7. Now today's Business 7 edition, of course, available in Republikein, Algemene Zeitung and the Namibian Sun. In that we focus on government spending, on capital projects and specifically on the safety aspect of it, on police stations, extra stations being built, shelters for people that are victims of GBV, etc. And we've looked at various development budgets to get the necessary data for our story. Now, interestingly enough, in the new development budget, the one that was tabled in May by new Finance Minister Ipumbushimi, we see that there's no mention of 5 new police station projects that were mentioned in a previous development budget. So it seems like those projects have been axed. Then we've got 6 more projects, police stations, that they will continue to develop. In most of the cases, the construction will only start on those projects this year. But what was interesting is that these projects have been on the books of government since 2014 and 2015, and barely a cent has been spent on those projects since then. So some serious questions to ask there surrounding the spending priorities of a government. The police stations that are not available in the development budget for this year, those 5 police stations, if one calculated what would have been spent in this year according to previous development budgets, that would have been 33 million. Now, of course, those police stations are off the table. And yet, the taxpayer will have to pay about $47 million in the current year for extensions and upgrades and the rehabilitation of several prisons countrywide. One also needs to look at the question of how safe people in Namibia are. Now we know that according to data that at least 1 out of every 4 women do suffer from gender-based violence, and government in 2018 embarked on a project of pumping about 40 million into the provision of safe houses and shelters for victims of GBV. Now, we've seen from the development budgets that we've looked at that since 2018, on average, government has only spent $1 million a year on these safe houses. Some very interesting data to have a look at there, and some serious questions we hope will come from this debate. In our infographic in Business 7 today, we give you a snapshot of the impact of COVID-19, or the anticipated impact of COVID-19 on the Namibian economy this year. We have done so by looking at the economic forecasts of the Bank of Namibia, and we've compared those that the bank released last year, and then the 3 that the bank released so far this year, and one can see an absolute severe impact of the pandemic on an already recessionary economy. We also have Bruce Hansen. He's the managing director of Simonis Storm, and we have spoken to him on his take on this latest forecast, on the current economic outlook, and what he expects for the economy in the short to medium term. The Bank of Namibia recently released their updated economic outlook for Namibia for this year. And in the studio, we welcome Bruce Hansen. He's the Managing Director of Simonis Storm, and no stranger in the Biz 7 studio. Hello, Bruce. Welcome, and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Jo Marie.
Bruce,
And thank
before
you for
we
having
get to
me.
the outlook of the bond, can you quickly summarize for us what your experience is of the current situation of the economy?
Thank you, Jo Marie. I think if you just look at the current metrics or indicators that we normally follow, for instance, the motor vehicle sales, which is a proxy for the strength of the consumer, that's being on a downward trend. If you look at inflation, which is another indication of the strength of the economy and also of the consumer, that's also on a downward trend. And then if you look at private sector credit extension, that also shows the strength of the economy through credit lending activities, and that's also down. So if you look at those three indicators, it definitely show that that there is a sluggish economic activity, and that will definitely impact the gross domestic product. We're still awaiting the final figures for the GDP. I think for the second quarter GDP, but definitely that will be severely negative. And I think we've also seen that the Bank of Namibia in their quarterly of June, that they've also revised that downwards from 6.9%, I think, to 7.8%. So,
Yes.
so the situation currently is it's not a good situation.
Yes, of course, the bond in their latest outlook indeed forecasting a contraction of 7.8% as their baseline scenario for 2020, and the worst case scenario, even worse, that is coming in at minus 12.2%. Bruce, what do you think the chances are that there's going to be a movement from the baseline scenario towards the worst case scenario?
I think, Jo Marie, the baseline scenario, if I just take what we have estimated as Simonis
Slightly buffering there again. Seems the internet's not our biggest friend this morning. Producer Matthias, how does it look over there? Do we still have Bruce? Okay, we're going to get Bruce back in a minute and we'll continue the conversation. Yes, well, the internet definitely not our best friend to know, but that's the one thing that we've learned from COVID-19 is to make alternative plans and to make them fast. So we've got Bruce back on the telephone, and we'll conduct the rest of the interview on the telephone. Bruce, before we were so rudely interrupted, I was asking you, between the baseline scenario of the bond predicting a contraction of 7.8% for 2020 and the worst case scenario of minus 12%, what do you think the chances are that there might be a little bit of movement more towards the worst case scenario this year?
I think the chances are probably more, it's probably better going to the worst case scenario. Simonis Storm estimated minus 8.4% for 2020. So I think anywhere between that's minus 7.9% and the minus 12.2%. I think we'll probably have to make up, but we have to pin it down in that range. I don't think it'll be better than that minus 7.9%. So I think chances are pretty high that they will move towards the worst case scenario.
Bruce, also, we've now had announcement that tourists will be allowed back into Namibia via air. Do you think that might make an impact on the tourism situation at the moment? We know that they are in extremely big trouble.
It is difficult to say, Jo Marie, because we don't know what the situation on the ground would be like. So what are the practical steps that will be taken? I know that there are some. The way government has put it forth is that this tourist will go directly to his or her place or destination, and then be in quarantine for that 7 days. I'm not sure exactly how that will operate. So the question is more a case of, if I'm a tourist from outside, would I want to go into a jurisdiction where we still have a curve that is increasing, the COVID curve is still increasing? I think that's the one. And the second one is that, do I want to go in and spend 7 days of my holiday not really doing anything? So I think the practical implications of this. Now, I have to commend government for wanting to assist the tourism sector. I just don't know how practically this will work. And I think that's probably where one would have to look at, whether this will make a significant contribution or a contribution over the short term. I think probably a longer term. So let's say 2 or 3 months from now, that that may assist the sector. I don't know about immediately.
Very few sectors in the economy that are performing at the moment. But are there some green shoots in the economy that might just help to alleviate the situation?
I don't think so. I don't think for the immediate future, no. Because remember where we're at currently is that we're trying to contain the situation, the medical situation, the health situation, and so all our focus is on the health situation and trying to make sure that that we don't get more and more cases. Now, we're also not doing the best job in terms of preventing that, or bringing the number of cases down. So all the focus is on that, and not so much on the economic side of things. So if you just think about it, if I look at construction, for instance, what I do see is that there are a couple of big projects ongoing. For instance, the Nedbank project is ongoing, I know. But what about the smaller projects and the smaller building contractors? I don't think there's anything happening there. So, Jomari, if you were to ask me a brutal, honest question, I would say there's nothing at this point in time, and over the short term, I don't think we'll see any economic growth in any of the sectors, because it's not just a health issue that we have to focus on, but we also have to focus on our economic realities. Remember, before COVID, we were already in an economic recession, a prolonged economic recession.
That brings me to my next question, Bruce, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but given the absolute historic contraction that we are expecting this year, plus the previous recession years, and who knows what next year is going to deliver, are we now at a point where we can start talking about a depression?
Maybe I should. Yeah, it is a loaded question. So what I probably want to do is to say, look, there are some positives. So let me quickly talk about the positives. What we have is we have at least hopefully there will be a flattening of the curve. Now that we've seen that curve spike, we can get to a point where we can flatten the curve. I think that was what we've seen in the world, is that increasing curve, and then the flattening of the curve, and then a declining curve. So there might be that possibility. The second one is that there was the appointment of key personnel, the Minister of Finance, the Bank of Namibia Governor, and now the Special Advisor to the President. I think that's positive. And then there's the medium-term budget of the Minister of Finance. Time has now settled a bit since his appointment, and some developments have unfolded, and one would hope that you would see some policy direction, or clear policy direction, in the upcoming budget. So those are the positive factors. The negative ones would be the curve does not flatten at all. So this curve might just continue for the next couple of months. The key personnel that I talked about are not allowed to perform their duties unfettered. So they were appointed for a specific reason, and if they can fulfill that mandate, it would be great. But if not, we might have some roadblocks there. And then if in the budget, if we don't have any clear policy, or no policy at all, or policy direction at all, then that could also be an issue. So there are some positive factors, there are some negative factors. Now, if the positive factors prevail, I think we can climb our way steadily out of the recession. But if we don't, And remember, we also need to look at, I have not seen any indications of changes in the growth inhibited or business unfriendly policies that we've been talking about last year and the year before that. So if those things don't change, I think we will just climb deeper into the hole than instead of climbing up.
Bruce, just to sum up, what are the crucial things that government needs to do now to help the economy?
Remember what we must think of is that the economy will not immediately turn around. We have been for too long. We've been at a place where we've just dug this deep hole for ourselves. So what we first have to do is look at those policies, those business unfriendly policies. I think those are the things that we need to look at first, because and it's, if you look back in our history, we've been talking about changing these policies. So can we get to a point where we change the policy? Because change is not change until it is changed. So we have identified the problem. There are solutions on the table. Let's make a selection of the solution, and then we introduce the solution and execute on that. So that's very important for me. I think and this is more philosophical than anything else. We are sitting at a place where your business confidence and your consumer confidence have taken a massive dent. So we need to get to a point where we can restore that. So it means that we must have a clear direction. Because a double-minded man is just unstable in all his ways. You can't lead the nation. You can't lead economic recovery if there's no clear direction. There must be unity in decision making and implementation. So unity builds that momentum, and it then leads into quicker implementation. I think we must look at public interest above self-interest. We have now seen that self-interest does not serve us well. It does not serve not just Namibia, but I think in general it does not work well. So public interest above self-interest. We must know what the priorities are so that we can focus on that. And I think ensuring accountability. We must be clear what needs to be achieved, and if that's not been achieved, we must keep people accountable, and there must be repercussions if we don't achieve the goals that we set out for ourselves. I think those are just sort of at a high level and philosophically, but we need to get that right. Otherwise, the practical outflow will not follow from that. There are some things that we can, and we've been talking about that. We can look at the medical aid, for instance, restructure that medical aid. We should look at the state-owned enterprises, restructure those state-owned enterprises. I've just every now and then there's talk of another state-owned enterprises to be added. We need to stop with that. We need to get to a point where we restructure those so that we can make government smaller in the economy and make private sector bigger in the economy. Because as an economy, we cannot continue having such a small private sector. So, Jo Marie, there's a number of things that need to take place, but I think, just in terms of our minds, that we need to get the minds right, that we need to get the minds of the people around us, especially those that are in decision-making positions, that we get them right so that we can move forward and make those changes that we should be making. Because if we don't move forward in one direction, you can come up with all the practical solutions, but those solutions will not function effectively.
Bruce, thank you very much. As always, extremely insightful to talk to you. The best to you and everybody else at Simonis Storm. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo Marie.
As always, it's been a pleasure to share this program with you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe.